All right, welcome back, everybody. Eli here, and today we had so much response actually from the last crossover Meet Cool People and Seventh Fold episode that I did by myself that I decided I'm going to start making this a regular thing. So, thank you for the feedback. I had several people actually reach out to me personally and say this was awesome. Thank you so much. So, I appreciate that. So, today I want to go into a topic that I think is very relevant for just about anybody, especially for those of us that are in business. As we all know, the last few years, life has been kind of crazy, and it just kind of there's tends to be a lot of hit after hit after hit type of things. So let's talk about the virtue of resilience. And I want to go through 5 questions that are going to help you get over that process, especially when you're at that point where you're thinking about quitting. And these are things that I ask myself. These are things that help me get through the day. And, because we all have bad days. Reality is that that's just a fact. So let's just dive right into it. The first thing you want to do, if you are suffering from that point of procrastination and just not getting things done, and you just don't want to do it, and you feel like you're about ready to give up, one of the first things you want to ask yourself is, what's the specific problem I'm trying to escape? And think about that for a minute, because a lot of times people don't realize how much it's actually based on something else that's going on in their world. And so chances are there's some piece of, and it may not even have anything to do with your actual business or the project or whatever it is, but there's something you're trying to get away from. And you want to make sure that you know what that really is. Because if you don't know what that is, you're going to think it's a bigger picture, or you're just not a very good person, or you're not good at something, or whatever all the negative self-talk stuff is that we go through. And reality, it could be you're burned out. You're tired of doing that particular thing. And for me personally, I go through this exercise, and when I saw this question originally, it was like, yeah, there's probably some validity to that. For me personally, one of the things that I run into a lot is that I work very hard. I work a lot, and I don't really take time off, and I burn myself out, which is, we all know that's not a good thing. And so when I actually get to that point where I do truly procrastinate, like on a day that I'm supposed to get stuff done and I've got time to get stuff done, and then I just don't get it done, a lot of times that's actually because of the fact that I hadn't stopped to realize I needed to actually shut down for a bit. And my brain is trying to escape from the consistent hustle. And so that could be what it is. And it could be you're just burned out of doing the thing, and it's time for you to make a pivot or change, whatever term you want to use with that, to evolve. Some of the things I'm doing right now are actually a version of evolution in my world. I like to say pivots are when things happen all of a sudden. You have to make a shift. 2020 was a great example of that. Most of us had to make a pivot because we didn't have time to evolve to something else. And then there's times where we have to evolve to something else. We have to think about it and realize, okay, it's time to move on. And so you have to ask yourself that question: what is the baseline reasoning for me wanting to quit, or why I'm procrastinating on this? So stop and think about that. Write that question down and spend some time, spend a half an hour, headphones on, some relaxing music, distracted or getting away from all the distractions, and think about this. The second question I want you to think about is, will I face the same challenge elsewhere? Because this is where we have to get to that root problem. And that's the first question comes in really in handy for this. It leads us to the second question, because the second question is, if I move to this other thing, if I give up on this and do something different, am I going to run into the same problem? Because then you might find out there's something else going on if that's the case. If you're truly burned out on a particular thing, maybe you've been in the same business for a long time and you're ready to do something new, that's legit. But if you're procrastinating because you just really don't want to work, yeah, that's a different problem. And so if you ask yourself this question, will I will I face the same challenge elsewhere? That's going to give you a lot of insight as to where the root piece of the problem is, because changing just to a different job basically isn't going to fix anything. We all know that. We've seen people that bounce between job and job and job and job because they're not happy wherever they go, but they haven't figured out what that root thing is that's causing it to begin with. Okay. And the next thing you want to think about is, what skills could I build by staying? Could it actually be in my best interest to keep doing what I'm doing, because maybe I'm just not good enough yet? People who are natural achievers tend to give up a lot easier than people that struggle, because if things are super easy for them, they'll keep doing it. But once they get hard, they're like, yeah, I don't want to do it anyway. And they move on. And then they never really excel at that thing. And so stop and think about this. If you're actually going to do the thing and stick with it, that project, that business, whatever it is. I mean, I could use business as a great example. We know so many people that bounce between business and business to business, or starting something new every year. And most of that is because they don't have the gumption to stick with it, to give it time to actually work. And so think about that one. Okay. Now, question number 4 is, who's counting on me to push through? Now, this is a big one. This is where you have to think about other people. If you've got a family, if your family is counting on you to push through and figure this thing out instead of starting over from scratch someplace else, you might need to actually do that. And a lot of times when we start doubting ourselves and getting on that situation where we want to give up, we feel like we're a failure, we feel like we're not doing the right thing, we start to give up and use the excuses and say, it's just not for me, I should do something else. But if we put that little caveat in there that somebody else is relying on us to make this work, we're going to stick with it and we're going to try harder. And then we start seeing some success. Going back to the previous questions, maybe you just haven't been doing it long enough and you got to give it a little more time. Okay. And your 5th question, what will I regret more, staying or leaving? If you stick around doing the same thing, and I know this has happened many times, people stick with the same business or the same job for 30, 40, 50 years, and they regret never doing other things they should have done. That's not a good place to be. Or the other side, if you regret leaving because you just gave up too soon and didn't have the dedication to stick it out, which are you going to regret more? And stop and think about that. If you take these 5 questions and spend a little bit of time, spend a half an hour at a coffee shop with your earbuds and the mocha. That's one of my favorite ways to do my thinking. I'll get a notebook and sit there and just write. But if you stop and think about this stuff, it's going to give you a lot of insight to where you're stuck. Because resilience is something that a lot of society is missing right now. They give up too easy and it's too hard for them, but it's not really hard. It's that they're not sticking with it long enough and they're not putting the effort in to make it work. And that's a really big, important thing. If you want to get ahead in life, you want to succeed, you're going to have rough times. We're all going to have that. As an entrepreneur, it's so funny. I've been in business over 30 years now. And people talk about that. They're like, God, you've been in business for so long. And I'm like, yeah, I still get up every day and try to figure out how crazy I am. Because you know what? It would be easier for me to go work for somebody else and not have to think about all the things that I do. It'd be safer. Okay. I wouldn't have to think so hard. I wouldn't have to do so much. I would also be miserable. And to be perfectly honest, I would regret staying at a job like that. I know that about myself. And that's what keeps me going. So once you ask these questions and really dig deep, spend some time truly thinking about this. Talk to yourself. Let the voices talk for a bit. It's going to open up a lot of doors for you in the way of, okay, I am on the right path. Or, you know what? I don't know that I really am on the right path. Maybe it is time for me to make a shift. Okay. The key with this is when you start asking better questions, you're going to get better answers. You've probably heard that phrase before. It's been around forever. I think the first time I heard it was from Tony Robbins. But it really is true. And sometimes those questions you have to ask yourself, because a lot of times no one else is going to ask them and you have to do it. So hopefully this was helpful for you. And hopefully this helps you understand what resilience really is. And if are you sticking with something for resilience? Are you sticking with it? Or are you giving up because you're making it too, you're giving up too easy? Because resilience truly is a virtue. Sticking with something until you know it's just not the right thing, that's a powerful thing because most people won't do it. So hopefully this was helpful for you. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your ideas, your feedback. If this was helpful, please let me know. Like I said, the last solo episode I did for Meet Cool People was awesome. I had a bunch of people reply back saying that they really enjoyed that one. So I'm going to start doing more of these solo episodes like this and this kind of crossover with Sevenfold stuff. So with that said, get out there, have an amazing week. If there's anything I can do to help you out, reach out, let me know. Take care.